Welcome to Haunted Talks, the official podcast of The Haunted Walk, offering ghost tours and paranormal adventures in Kingston, Ottawa, and Toronto, Ontario, and online experiences to anyone in this mortal realm. My name is Jim Dean. I am the creative director, and we thank you so much for joining us for this episode. On this show, we often explore topics that scare us, and I've often wondered why we enjoy it so much. There clearly is a thrill of the unknown. We are wired to seek new experiences and sensations, and exploring the unknown can be a way to satisfy this urge. When we expose ourselves to something scary, we are essentially taking a risk and get a bit of an adrenaline rush. Exploring scary topics can also be a way to test ourselves and see how we react to fear. In that sense, facing our fears can be empowering and can give us a sense of control over something that would otherwise be frightening. When we voluntarily expose ourselves to something scary, we are essentially taking control of the situation, which can be a way to build up our self-confidence and resilience. Exploring scary topics can be a way to process our own fears and anxieties. When we watch a horror movie, read a scary book, or listen to this podcast, we are essentially confronting our own fears in a safe and controlled setting. This can be therapeutic, as it allows us to explore these things without actually putting ourselves in any danger. It is in this spirit I would like to introduce today's topic. It is one I often find myself wrestling with while doing genealogical work or historical research. It is not the fear of dying, but rather the fear of being forgotten. When looking at old gravestones, it often occurs to me that the names carved into the stone had real and rich lives, just like our own. And while we may be able to track down certain basic information about their lives, when they were born, when they died, their occupation, and perhaps even some details about particular moments in their lives, most of their experience, their day-to-day existence, and who they were, is forever lost and inaccessible in the mists of time. Like ghosts, we know they lived, we know they died, but as more time goes by, they slowly start to fade from view. As David Eagleman famously and somewhat ominously wrote, there are 3 deaths. The first is when the body ceases to function. The second is when your body is consigned to the grave. The third is that moment, sometime in the future, when your name is spoken for the last time. Normally, the runway to being forgotten is long, but there is a case that has weighed on the dark corners of my imagination for many years, where that process happened much more quickly. Joyce Carol Vincent was a British woman who tragically died in her London apartment in 2003, but her body wasn't discovered until over 2 years later. One of the most haunting aspects of her death was the discovery that her television had been on the entire time, playing continuously to an audience that had departed long ago. We examine her story and how she could have been forgotten for so long. But before we get to that, do you love ghost stories Are you intrigued by dark history? Join us on a haunted walk, the ultimate spooky adventure in Kingston, Ottawa, and Toronto, Ontario. Our expert storytellers will take you on a journey through the city's most haunted locations, sharing chilling tales of ghostly encounters and unexplainable happenings. From haunted jails to forgotten graveyards, the Haunted Walk will transport you to another time and place. Join us on a spine-tingling paranormal adventure. Book your tickets now at hauntedwalk.com. On our website, you can also find information about our online experiences, which can be enjoyed from anywhere in the world. Spend an eerie night in with our Haunting at Home online paranormal adventure, or grab a spot around our virtual haunted campfires and hear some of the best storytellers in the world share their favorite creepy stories. Information on our Haunting at Home, virtual haunted campfires, and our in-person ghost tours can be found on our website, hauntedwalk.com. And if you're enjoying our episodes, please consider leaving us a 5-star review wherever you listen to us, and we would be honored if you recommend the show to anyone you know who loves things that go bump in the night. Be sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter, all at Haunted Walk, for the latest updates, new episodes, blog posts, and some finely curated spooky memes. On January 25th, 2006, officials from a North London housing association made a startling discovery when they entered the studio apartment of a resident that had fallen quite behind in paying the rent. Lying on the sofa were the skeletal remains of the occupant. In the corner of the room, the television was still turned on and tuned to BBC One. Christmas presents she had wrapped were waiting patiently on the floor, and a considerable pile of mail had built up behind the front door. Dishes were in the sink, and food in the refrigerator had expiry dates from over 2 years before. The remains were in such an advanced state of decomposition that they could only be identified by comparing the teeth with a smiling passport photo of the occupant. Her name was Joyce Carol Vincent. An inquest heard she probably died around Christmas in 2003 and lay there forgotten until January of 2006. When this story first broke, it made headlines around the world. There is something incredibly haunting about a body lying undisturbed and undiscovered for so long, particularly as the television flickered away. It also raises a number of questions. How did this happen? Who was this woman? And how did no one notice she had vanished from life? Some of these questions are easier to answer than others. A man who lived in the flat below reported he never noticed any smell and just assumed the resident, like many people in the building, simply kept to themselves. Joyce's next-door neighbor would occasionally notice a foul, rotting smell when he opened his window, as well as little black bugs that would start to crawl through. However, he never really considered it could be coming from the next apartment, as he could often hear someone home, watching TV. When the housing authority entered the premises, they found that the kitchen window was left partially open, which allowed the worst of the odor to dissipate, while also providing insects easy access to the remains. Half of Joyce's rent was being paid automatically by benefit agencies, giving the appearance she was still active in the flat and had just fallen behind. When combined with the lengthy process necessary to evict a tenant, which includes mailing letters and other attempts at contact, this explains in part why it took so long for her body to be discovered. Documentarian Carol Morley managed to track down several people that knew Joyce for her excellent film, Dreams of a Life. Reading here from an article she wrote for The Guardian in October of 2011. I spent time in libraries and public record offices, piecing together some of Joyce's history through official records and locating previous addresses and relatives. Then I received an email from Martin Lister, and he wrote to me in the hope that the Joyce in question was not the same Joyce he went out with in his 20s. We quickly established that it was. On the phone, he said, it just didn't add up. She never drank much, she never took drugs. But the thing that most surprised him, he said, was that she ended up in social housing. They had met in 1985 when he worked negotiating client renewals for a shipping company. Joyce was 20 years old at the time and secretary to his boss. She was always asking me to go out for a drink, but it never occurred to me that she was asking me out. I thought, what a shame, she doesn't have any friends. I didn't read anything into it. Eventually, Martin went for a drink with Joyce, and they subsequently dated for about 3 years afterwards. They kept in touch, on and off, until 2002. Looking back, Martin was unsure if he ever knew exactly what was going on in Joyce's life. You look back and think, I wish I'd asked more. Wish I understood more. Pulling some photographs from a carrier bag, Martin looked at one wistfully before handing it to me. It was the first photograph of Joyce I had seen. Continuing, I held it carefully, trying to take in every detail. People used to say she looked like Whitney Houston, Martin said proudly. Her hair came from her mother's side. Her mother was Indian. She died when Joyce was young, 11, I think. She had a real bond with her mom, especially as she was the youngest. She had 4 sisters, but I think she was the only one to be born in the UK. The sisters brought her up, really. Her dad was a carpenter, but wasn't too involved. I never met her family, which I thought was a bit odd. I don't understand it. She worked her way up, had really good jobs, she earned excellent money. His voice was tinged with sadness as he said, apparently, she wanted to marry me. But, being a typical bloke, I was like, no, don't be ridiculous. I didn't want to settle down. A few weeks after meeting Martin, Morley met with John Awano, who was once friends with both Martin and Joyce. He had spoken to her in 2002, but felt some guilt that they never made time to meet. John said, I want to know Joyce's story myself, and that sounds ridiculous coming from someone who knew her. There must have been some signs she would end this way, but if there were, she covered them up with this happy-go-lucky, having a great time act. She died of neglect. We all loved her, but not enough to stop her from dying. Joyce worked at Ernst & Young, one of the biggest accounting firms in the world, in a prominent position, for 4 years before abruptly resigning in 2001. She had gotten engaged during this time and gave conflicting stories to colleagues about what she was going to do next. She told some she was going to be doing a lot of traveling, while others that she had been recruited by a rival firm. While the stories differ, the recollections of her are consistent, a very competent and happy person. As Carl Morley began to be contacted by more and more of Joyce's friends, a clear pattern began to emerge. All concurred she was beautiful, intelligent, funny, down to earth, and that she loved to sing. Many of them were shocked by how her story ended, with one saying, "I can't understand it. She had a lot of friends and a good social life. She was not a girl that came and sat in front of the telly. If she was white, she could have been a debutante. She was upwardly mobile, a high flyer." Another was especially surprised that at the age of 38, Joyce was single. They said that Joyce was the kind of person that would worry most women. She was a threat, good-looking, intelligent, successful, and on a mission for the type of man all women are after. Another stated that her friends were mostly men who had crushes on her, men who followed her. There was always a story about a guy that had the hots for her. It was just unbelievable how intense guys would get with her. They would come on so heavy and not let go. I can only think she became isolated from her family and friends because of a guy that she chose. Maybe she was ashamed of the situation she got herself into. This quote offers our first clue into why Joyce may have ended up so isolated. After leaving Ernst & Young, she did not travel or start an exciting new job. Sadly, shortly after she left, she spent some time in a domestic abuse shelter and worked as a cleaner in a budget hotel. It was during this period that she became estranged from her family. Though this estrangement was not because of a big fight or some kind of family drama, but rather it occurred slowly and over time. In fact, her sisters hired a private detective to try to find her. He did locate the flat, but their letters and phone calls went unanswered, as she had already passed by that time. Domestic abuse clearly played a role in what happened to Joyce, and some have speculated that her situation was so dangerous that she felt the need to change her life and hide herself away, which ultimately, and ironically, she did, only too well. There's such a contradiction in this case between how her friends and associates describe her and the mortal and forgotten remains that were found in front of the television. In the end, the police decided she died of natural causes, as there were no signs of foul play or a drug overdose, and the door to her apartment was double locked when the authorities finally entered. The exact cause of death was impossible to determine, but the leading theories are either it was an asthma attack or complications from a recent peptic ulcer, which had landed her in the hospital for 2 days the month before she passed. With this story, it is all too easy to concentrate on the darkness, on the strange circumstances surrounding the discovery of the body, the evils of domestic abuse, and our own anxieties about being forgotten. But how temporary, fleeting, and delicate our connections to each other can unexpectedly become. But I don't think we end there. Instead, I think it is important we look back with a different perspective. Joyce Carol Vincent lived an incredible life, from growing up in very modest conditions to successfully climbing the corporate ladder. She was well thought of by those who knew her best. She was friendly, fun, intelligent, and a beautiful person, both inside and out. She had a large network of friends that cared about her, and through them, she got to experience some amazing things. She had dinner with Stevie Wonder, spoke on the phone with Isaac Hayes, and met Ben E. King, who co-wrote and sang Stand By Me. Filmmaker Carol Morley managed to find video evidence of one of these brushes with a celebrity. In 1990, a televised tribute concert was held in London's Wembley Stadium for Nelson Mandela, who had recently been released from jail. It was broadcast to 61 countries and watched by millions of people around the world. As Morley watched the hours of concert footage, she began to get discouraged that she would not be able to find Joyce in such a large crowd. When the scene suddenly cut to Mandela backstage addressing the performers. As he ended a passionate speech to great applause and cheers, there was a cut to a wide-angle shot from the back of the room, when suddenly one figure turned towards the camera, the light reflecting off her earrings. It was Joyce, smiling, vibrant, and alive. Thank you so much for joining us for this episode. If you would like to learn more about this story, I would highly recommend Carol Morley's film, Dreams of a Life. If you are suffering from domestic abuse, you are not alone and you deserve help. In the show notes, I will add some resources where you can seek help. As always, a special thank you to our Haunted Talks team, including Michelle Dennis, our outstanding audio editor. For information about our in-person ghost tours in Toronto, Ottawa, and Kingston, Ontario, as well as our online experiences, including our Haunting at Home and virtual haunted campfires, please visit our website, hauntedwalk.com. And be sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. If you haven't already, be sure to follow the show wherever you listen, and 5-star reviews are always greatly appreciated and eagerly read. Until we meet again, sweet dreams.